see all of you guys this morning. If you're like me and you came from Paradise, congratulations on not getting lost in the mist and fog that I couldn't see 10 feet in front of my face while I was driving. It was super fun. But glad to be here, glad to see you guys. For announcements, through the double doors back there in the back of the room, that's for walking age kiddos during the message. If you'd like them to be supervised by childcare, that's right in that room when the message starts. You can send them back that way. Through the single door next to it, under the North Star sign, is where our bathrooms are. Those will be on your left when you walk in there. And then just beyond that is a cry room for babies when you go through there if you feel like you need that. And then lastly, for announcements, we have a few youth trips coming up. There's one to a trampoline park, and then there's a guys and girls trip to Shingletown for some overnight trips. And if you have a middle schooler or high schooler and you're interested in that, you can talk to me or anybody on staff, and we can get you signed up for those trips. They're all free of charge, and we're taking sign-ups for them right now. So if you're interested in that, just let us know. But with that, I'm going to invite Scott up for our call to worship this morning.
Good morning. I think I need to say that differently at some point. That's just a habit of mine. So I'm going to lead us in the time of worship, or lead us into the call of worship this morning. And I just want to recap. So last week we started a Psalm series, and Caleb was speaking about how Psalms are like a common language for us to express ourselves to the Lord and what we're experiencing individually and corporately. So this week we're going to be going into lament. And so I'm going to read a written lament it's not from the book of Psalms, but it's geared towards your state and just things that are going on in the world today. And then the worship team is going to lead us in worship. So, all right. How long, O Lord, until we see you face to face? A world damaged and full of brokenness is what we see. We can't escape the news headlines, nor the bad news that surrounds us. A society serving self-interest and love growing cold. People in poverty, addiction, and depression left uncared for. How are we to help, O Lord? Will evil continue to prevail? How long, O Lord, until we see you face to face? We have faced too much loss this last year, Lord. A loss of loved ones has left us brokenhearted. Unfavorable health diagnoses leave us wondering. Loneliness and depression leave us lingering. How are we to move forward, O Lord? How long, O Lord, until we see you face to face? The cares of this life are heavy, but your burden is light. We submit ourselves to you. Please carry us. We can't do this on our own. We believe that you are faithful and trustworthy to see us through. As we long to see you face to face, be our everything.
If you'd like to stand, you can. If you'd like to sit, feel free. God in my living, there in my breathing, God in my waking, God in my sleeping, God in my resting, there in my working, God in my thinking, God in my speaking. Be my everything, be my everything, be my everything, be my everything. God in my hoping, there in my dreaming, God in my watching, God in my waiting, God in my laughing, there in my weeping, God in my hurting, God in my healings, be my everything, be my everything. everything. Be my 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 everything. Christ in me, Christ in me, Christ in me, the hope of glory. You are everything. Christ in me, Christ in me, Christ in me, the hope of glory. Be my everything. 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 God in my hoping, there in my dreaming, God in my watching, God in my waiting, God in my laughing, there in my weeping, God in my hurting, God in my healing. Be my everything. 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 You can be seated. Good morning. I get to preach today on our next type of psalm, which, like Caleb mentioned last week, is the Lament Psalms. And I did this way back in like November when we were first talking about what's our next series going to be. And I was like, well, I definitely want Lament. So for months it's been in my mind, processing through my heart, and then this week I'm like, what? Why did I choose? Why did I do this? But I'm actually really excited to dive into what Lament Psalms are and how they are for us. This week, there was some fresh lament coming. Caleb and I had the privilege on Tuesday, privilege and difficult honor, to sit with John Rawlings. It's not a good start. We sat with him. He's been on hospice for a couple weeks, and we sat with him and prayed with him. John and Priscilla have been part of our church for several years, and he has had Parkinson's, and Priscilla's been caring for him. He used to come in with his walker and sit over here usually, but for the last year or so, they've kind of been homebound. And so Tuesday we sat with him. Such an honor. And on Wednesday, he died. And there's just been a lot of that this year, hasn't there? So much. The reason that I chose Lament Psalms in the first place is because they've been really fresh and true to me since my dad died last February. Actually, it was a year ago this week that my mom called and said, took your dad to the hospital last night. He has pancreatitis, and they're going to admit him and treat him, and it seemed like not a really big deal. So a couple of days turned into a couple of weeks, and I remember coming to church in the middle of that, and some of you were praying with me, and I came and our friend Charles Brooks let us know that his mom had called him a similar call that week. That his dad had gone into the hospital with a brain bleed and he had died too. And I remember that morning when Charles was telling us about his dad and I was sad with him and grieving with him, thinking like, that might be what happens to Linda. And it was the first moment that like that thought had crossed my mind, that this might not end. It might not end the way I wanted it to. And isn't that often what we're looking for when we're in the midst of suffering or pain, is for it to end? It's not fun to suffer. It's not fun to be in pain. On my latest count, in our church family here, of all of our people, 12 of us have lost a parent this year. Like, can you imagine? That's a lot. It's a lot of loss. And five have lost a spouse. Like, that's, for a group this size of people, it just is a lot. And so today we're looking at lament songs and why we lament and what they're for. And it's not just grief and loss that we lament. There are so many other things. Lament is a passionate expression of our deepest emotions. So what other, this is for you all, what other emotions do we express in lament other than just grief? Shout out other things that we lament. Anger, absolutely. Frustration, yeah. But you said love, like a lost love. We lament broken relationships. Anything else? Disappointment. Yeah, loss of dreams or things not going the way we expected them to.
Brokenness within ourselves.
Absolutely. Brokenness within ourselves, our own sin. There's a whole psalm devoted to David confessing his own sin, Psalm 51. So many things that we lament. One of the most common laments in the book of Psalms is against my enemies who seem to be triumphing over me, over and over and over. So the question is, what are the lament psalms? If that is what lament is, what are the lament psalms? First of all, it is by far the most common type of psalm. Somewhere between 60 and 70 of the psalms are lament psalms. And I say between that because many of them have multiple ways that they can be categorized. Psalm 27 is a lament psalm, but it's also a psalm of deliverance and fits in both categories. But by far the most common is the lament psalms. And we have this book of psalms with 150 psalms for 65 of those to be lament psalms. That's a lot. The lament psalms are really not just an expression of our deepest emotions, but they're like a physical expression of our deepest emotions. We use our voices to lament. We use our bodies often. I think other cultures are probably way better at this than our American culture at using their bodies to lament. Caleb and I listened to this recording of an Irishman whose dad had died, and he just told the story of the whole community showing up at his house and wailing and crying, and the children came, and everyone was a participant with their bodies in the grief that they were experiencing. Our bodies react to our deep emotions even when we don't want them to. Tears are our body reacting to our emotions. Shouting sometimes. There are so many ways that our bodies carry what we're feeling. Our emotions aren't just in our mind or in our heart. Our whole bodies experience them. I've asked Gwen to read Psalm 6 for us, which really talks about our bodies and how they express our emotion.
Lord, do not rebuke me in your anger or discipline me in your wrath. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am faint. Heal me, Lord, for my bones are in agony. My soul is in deep anguish. How long, Lord? How long? Turn, Lord, and deliver me. Save me because of your unfailing love. Among the dead, no one proclaims your name. Who praises you from the grave? I am worn out from my groaning. All night long I flood my bed with weeping and drench my couch with tears. My eyes grow weak with sorrow. They fail because of all my foes. Away from me, all you who do evil, for the Lord has heard my weeping. The Lord has heard my cry for mercy. The Lord accepts my prayer. All my enemies will be overwhelmed with shame and anguish. They will turn back and suddenly be put to shame.
Thanks, Gwen. Did you hear that? I drenched my bed all night with my tears. My bones are in agony. There's physical expression of our emotions. And these lament songs give voice to those emotions. They give us language, like Caleb talked about last week and Scott mentioned, common language to express what's going on. The lament songs are also full of questions. I was reading through the Psalms over the last months just to get a feel for all of them. Now I lost the page I had. Anyways, there's a whole page of questions that the writers of the Psalms ask. How long, O Lord? Why do my enemies triumph over me? When will I see your salvation? So many questions. They're questions of ourselves often, but they're also questions of God. Bill is going to read Psalm 13, which illustrates all of these questions that we carry.
How long, O Lord, wilt thou forget me forever? How long wilt thou hide thy face from me? How long shall I take counsel in my soul, having sorrow in my heart all the day? How long will my enemy be exalted over me? Consider and answer me, O Lord my God. Enlighten my eyes, lest I sleep the sleep of death. Lest my enemies say, I have overcome him. Lest my adversaries rejoice when I am shaken. But I have trusted in thy loving kindness. My heart shall rejoice in thy salvation. I will sing to the Lord, because he has dealt bountifully with me.
Thanks, Bill. And that's just 2 of the 65 that hold this language of our deep feelings, our deep sorrows, our deep pains. I remember my first awareness of lament songs came when I was a teenager. I was probably 15 or so. And I had a good group of friends that were part of my youth group, and we went to school together, and a couple of the girls were fighting with each other, like teenagers sometimes do. And I was reading the Psalms, and I came across Psalm 55, and it says, "Oh, that I had the wings of a dove. I would fly away and be at rest. I would flee far away and stay in the desert. Selah." That phrase, "oh, that I had the wings of a dove," that comes back to me all the time. Just a few months ago, my sister called me, my sister Julie, and I answered the phone and she said, "Oh, that I had the wings of a dove." And I said, "Okay, tell me what's going on." It's like become our language of things are so bad. At the end of that passage, it said the word Selah. And it's throughout the book of Psalms. Maybe you've seen it when you're reading, and it's a transliteration of the Hebrew word because we don't have an English word for what Selah means. And my friend Selah was having dinner at our house a couple weeks ago, and I asked her, "Do you know what your name means?" And she did. She said, "Yeah, it means pause and reflect." And I was like, "Yeah, that's right." And pause and reflect is like to just stop for a minute and think about it. And let the meaning and the words and everything wash over us. So I've often just skipped those when I read the Psalms because it's just sitting there on the right side of the margin and you just keep going. But it's worth taking a Selah, pausing and reflecting when you get it. So that's your Selah for right now, just like side note, pause and reflect. Psalm 55 though, after it says, "Oh, that I had the wings of a dove," this is why it really stood out to me. If an enemy were insulting me, I could endure it. If a foe were raising himself against me, I could hide from him. But it is you, a man like myself, my companion, my close friend, with whom I once enjoyed sweet fellowship as we walked with the throng at the house of God. And so, when your friends are just turning on you or things happen, teenagers, the lament songs are the best because we feel a lot of feelings. So these appear for you. Don't forget to use them. We were actually talking about that at our Bible study this week. And Psalm 55 is one that Gwen mentioned. Like, I love that one. I was like, me too. That one. Oh, that I had the wings of a dove. And it just expresses something in us. I want to fly away and be done with this. It's too much. The Bible Project has videos about each of the books of the Bible, and I took a screenshot from their video actually on the book of Lamentations, which is the whole nother book about Lament Poems. And this is how it described Lament Poems: a form of protest, a way to process emotion, a place to voice confusion. Lament Poems restore a sacred dignity to human suffering. I think that the Lament Psalms let us know that the suffering is okay, that the sorrow we're walking through is okay, and we don't need to hurry through it. The goal of suffering doesn't have to be healing. That there can be a different goal and a different benefit to the suffering that we endure. The next screenshot is from the Psalms video from the Bible Project also, where, how long, O Lord? Lament are prayers of pain, confusion, and anger. They draw attention to what's wrong in the world, and they ask God to do something. That last line, asking God to do something, is key because so often when we want to end our suffering, we want to end our pain, we want to end our hurting, we just want it to end. We don't even care how, right? But when we ask God to do something, we bring Him into the process of what we're doing, of what we're lamenting. A couple of years ago, Bella and I were having a conversation, we'll call it, about cleaning her room. And she did not want to clean her room. She was lamenting the fact that it was time to clean her room. And so we were talking about why you have to clean your room, and she just kept saying, I don't want to clean your room. I said, that's fine that you don't want to, but you still have to. We were talking about how the only way you don't have to clean your room is if you actually clean your room. And then you don't have to clean it anymore. And I watched her little brain work and function, and she came up with this saying that just like meant everything to her. She made a sign out of it. It's so good. Her sign says, you seek what you desire through the toughest of the travel. So in her 9-year-old brain, this meant, what I want, I will get by doing what I don't want. And so often, that is what lament feels like. We have to walk through it. I was scrolling online this week, and a movie star popped up, and it was a little interview that a journalist was giving, and they asked this movie star, who hasn't been in the spotlight much lately, what advice do you give to someone who's going through a difficult time? And her response was, go right through it. That when there are things to lament, that the best way through it is to go through it. And the lament psalms give us permission to not be okay. They give us language to use when things are overwhelming, when our hurt and our pain and our suffering is real. The lament psalms also help us to hold sorrow and hope together. Because so many times when we want to get through the suffering, we just want to hold on to the hope. We want to forget that sorrow and leave it behind. Or sometimes we want to just stay in the sorrow and forget the hope. But these lament psalms, they hold both. In Psalm 6 that Glenn read, in Psalm 13, there was sorrow and there was hope. And these lament psalms hold them together, and it's not a progression of you can lament for 8 verses, and then you get to the finale, where you get to enjoy the hope and the victory. We actually get to hold them together. We want to end our suffering, but God invites us to go through the suffering together with Him. So I want to answer 2 questions. Why do we lament? Or I have 2 answers to the question, why do we lament? The first answer is for ourselves, and the second answer is for each other. So we lament for ourselves because, like I said before, our bodies experience the emotions that we carry in our minds and hearts. Our bodies hold it. In the months after my dad died, we would be talking with my mom and she'd say, I don't want to cry again today. And my sister Julie, the one who calls and says, oh, that I had the wings of a dove, she says to my mom, you know, crying is your best option here. That our bodies are holding on to that pain and it has to go somewhere. It can come out in all sorts of different ways. Snap at your family, or a random grief ambush that shows up out of nowhere, which is normal. But sometimes crying is our best option. The emotions have to have somewhere to go. Like I said, it's been a couple months I've been thinking about this since I signed up for Lament Songs in November. And as I was thinking about it and processing it, this verse from the New Testament, from Ephesians, kept coming to my mind. And it's Ephesians chapter 4, verse 31. And it says, get rid of all bitterness, rage, and anger, brawling and slander, along with every form of malice. This is in the same passage where Paul says, in your anger, do not sin. And he talks about being honest with each other, which is a huge part of lament, is honestly expressing what's going on inside of our souls. Paul does not say how to get rid of bitterness and anger and rage and all of these things, but I wonder if lament is a good way to get rid of some of these things that we carry with us and in us when we're going through hard times, when we're suffering, when we're grieving, when there's real loss that we have. That the best way to get rid of this is to lament. We don't have to hold on to it. We can be honest and we can express what is real and true in our hearts. Other reasons that we lament for ourselves, why we do it, is that the lament psalms give us a way to pour out our hearts to God. Sometimes I don't even know what I'm feeling when my feelings are especially large and overwhelming. I don't even know why. And the lament psalms give us language that we can use to express what's going on inside of our hearts, and we read it and we think, oh yeah, that's what I'm feeling today. That's me. They also give us access to language on our best days that will return to us on our worst. Lament psalms are here all of the time. We're not always grieving, we're not always in the midst of sorrow, but as we familiarize ourselves with these, we can, like my sister, cry out, oh, that I have the wings of a dove. It's in us because we have read it, we have internalized it, we have put it inside of our hearts so that when we need these expressions to bring out what is inside of us, we can do that. The lament psalms also invite others to express their grief as well, to share their griefs with us. There is a huge temptation when we are suffering, when we are grieving, when we're lamenting, to just want a nice packaged bow on it and be done with that season. There's a huge temptation to find our own end to our suffering. But that temptation, we're missing out when we hurry through it to try to be done with it, because our pain and our sorrow are often where we meet Jesus, because that is where we really need him the most. The second reason we lament is for each other, though, and I would say that temptation to hurry through suffering is even stronger when it's someone else's suffering that we're faced with. When we are carrying each other's burdens, and we want, maybe in a compassionate response even, we want to end their suffering too, because it's hard to suffer. And there's actually something beautiful we can learn by suffering together. Bob Kellerman has a quote that says, "Shared sorrow is an endurable sorrow. We were never meant to suffer alone. We are meant to comfort and encourage one another." And I think in this temptation to hurry through suffering, I have sometimes taken that comfort and encouragement as wanting to put a silver lining around something and just say, "Oh, it's going to be fine. I'm actually really good at that. It's going to be fine." Which I believe in my core being that God is good and he is huge and it will be okay. But actually it can be okay right here in the midst of it, because Jesus wants to come and be in it with us, and with us together as we share in each other's sorrows and sufferings. Job is often, his friends are often heralded as a terrible example of how to grieve with each other. And they actually start off kind of great. So, Job chapter 2. When Job's three friends, Eliphaz the Temanite, Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamathite, heard about all the troubles that had come upon him, they set out from their homes and met together by agreement to go and sympathize with him and comfort him. When they saw him from a distance, they could hardly recognize him. They began to weep aloud, and they tore their robes and sprinkled dust on their heads. Then they sat on the ground with him for 7 days and 7 nights. No one said a word to him, because they saw how great his suffering was. What a comfort. They're not even saying anything. Just their presence is a comfort to Job in his huge suffering. I have not always been good at lamenting, partly because I've had a really great life. There hasn't been a whole lot to lament. But I would say even in the past 5 years, I have learned a lot about lamenting from others who I have been able to walk with as they walk through deep suffering. Some of you I have cried with and learned that the goal doesn't have to be to end the suffering, that the goal can be to find Jesus in it. I've learned that my favorite way to grieve my dad's loss is with my sisters and my mom. I usually have our video chat because we live in different towns, but it's so much better that way. And we get on there and we laugh and we tell stories and then we cry, or maybe just one of us is crying that day, but we're together doing it. And there is such a gift to be shared with each other when we can lament together. Excuse me. The week after Christmas, a friend of ours from Washington, where Caleb and I were youth pastors when we first got married, posted a blog article that her son had written right after Christmas. And this son, he was a high schooler when we moved up to Washington, and he graduated shortly after we arrived, but we knew his family well. And he had gone off to college and gotten married and had a son. And about 6 years ago, his 18-month-old son died suddenly in his sleep. What deep sorrow and a huge loss. And they were devastated. Everyone who knew them was devastated. And he wrote this article just 2 weeks ago about him and his wife's process as they have grieved the loss of their son. And I want to read just a little bit of it because it speaks to our sharing grief together, lamenting together. We have faith, they said. We desired community, but being at church was too painful. Ultimately, we wanted to be part of a church where there was room for our story of grief. I have that. I'll share this whole blog because it's worth reading. Ultimately, we wanted to be a part of church where there was room for our story of grief. Not just, this is sad, we know your story, but isn't Jesus great? We wanted grief and sorrow. In a word, lament, to be part of the normal, regular worshiping life of the church. A church that acknowledged pain and sorrow. A church that week in, week out held space for the pain of its members and the pain of the world. It's a form of hospitality to hold space for another's story, for another's pain. Hospitality isn't only about the moment, asking someone what they need. Hospitality is also about preparation. A church that acknowledges grief in its liturgy is a church that invites the bereaved into community. It is a church that says, we lament, we have sorrow, we grieve. It is a church that does not hide from or sweep away genuine experiences of pain. Of course, for Christians, there is the hope of resurrection, the redemption and healing of all things, including our pain and sorrow. But that reality is yet to come in its fullness. Some churches point always to hope as if present pain did not exist. Some churches look for the quick fix of Jesus, who heals all wounds. These churches demonstrate their discomfort in the face of grief and pain. They pray for healing, for hope, for resolution, for miracles, as if the only purpose of illness is to get well again, for God's glory. Perhaps these kinds of churches pray for healing not only for the benefit of the sick. These churches pray for healing so their own discomfort at seeing pain can be eased. That's the temptation, to hurry on past it so that we don't have to hurt anymore. But there is an invitation to invite God into our suffering, to be comforted by Him, to be comforted by each other as we endure suffering. So how can we make our church, how can we make us a people who lament well? I have 3 ideas, and there are probably more. I've even asked some of you about this question this week. But the first way I think that we can make our church a place where we lament well is to know each other. When we know what each other is going through, what our families look like, what our struggles are, we can lament well together. When we know what your kids are up to, or what your job is, we can lament together when things don't go well. Another way that we can make ourselves and our church a place where we lament well is to listen to each other, to be present, and to ask questions so that we can listen some more. Like Job's friends started out doing, just be there. Listen together. Share in each other's sufferings. Another way we can do it is to practice lamenting even when things are good. Whether that's with a friend who is going through something difficult, or whether it is just in the practice of reading the lament psalms. And we live in a broken world. There is always brokenness to see and lament and to invite God into. That, if we become comfortable with it on a regular basis, I think it's easier to remember to lament when we find ourselves in those places of real sorrow and suffering. We really want to bring our suffering to an end. At least I do. We long for all things to be made new. There's a promise on the last page of the Bible. God says, "Behold, I am making all things new." That's what we want. But the Lament Psalms offer us a way to sit in that longing. That longing for things to be made new is good. God put that in us because He is good. But somehow our sufferings and our griefs are a constant reminder of our need for God. They actually produce in us that longing for God's perfect presence. This is where Jesus meets us. So what if, instead of longing to bring an end to our suffering, an end that we really can't produce ourselves, what if our longing becomes an invitation for Jesus to come and meet us here? Right where we are. What if that longing for Him becomes the goal of our lives instead of ending our suffering? That longing for Jesus to come and meet us here in our sorrow, in our pain, in our grief. Let's not hurry through the struggle on the way to that end that we can't produce ourselves. That same last page of the Bible also says that God is the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end. He holds that, not us. And He offers to come and be with us. Of all 60 plus lament psalms, all of them hold some hope at the end of them, except for one. Psalm 88. There's not much hope there. And I'm going to read that to close us this morning, and then we're going to worship the Lord together. I'm just going to read the last section, but as I read it, I encourage you to hear the longing in this psalm, the longing for God to come and be with us. But I cry to you for help, O Lord. In the morning, my prayer comes before you. Why, O Lord, do you reject me and hide your face from me? From my youth, I have been afflicted and close to death. I have suffered your terrors and am in despair. Your wrath has swept over me. Your terrors have destroyed me. All day long they surround me like a flood. They have completely engulfed me. You have taken my companions and loved ones from me. The darkness is my closest friend. Amen. Would you come, Lord Jesus?
We're going to spend some time in song. Find a posture of worship that you can just share your heart with the Lord, whether that's standing or sitting or kneeling. And we're going to join together in song. Lord, I come. I confess, bowing here, I find my rest. Without you, I fall apart. You're the one that guides my heart. Lord, I need you. Oh God, how I need you. Sin runs deep, your grace is long, your grace is found, is where you are, and where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way, when I cannot stand or fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Sing that again. So teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way, when I cannot stand or fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Praise God from whom all blessings flow. Praise Him, all creatures here below. Praise Him above the heavenly hosts. Praise Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. As you go this week, there's a psalm, Psalm 30, that says, tears may last for the night, but joy comes in the morning. And I always kind of grew up thinking that meant like, the pain's gonna go away. But sometimes it's spelled morning, like the morning. But I think also, joy comes through the morning. So, go in His love.